I am, as most of you know, Bob O'Kelly, and to steal a line from Dickens, I was born. And I am the original baby boomer, and here is how that happened. The war ended, World War II ended in Europe before it did the Pacific. They put my father on a ship, and he was to go to the Pacific Theater of War. Truman dropped the atomic bomb, and the war ended, and they just happened to be about the way they were going to go through the Panama Canal, swung them out, and they were like 100 miles from Boston. When the war ended, the ship put in at Boston, Dad got off, got out of the Army, got on a bus, a train, came to Atlanta as fast as he could, and took my mother to Vogel's State Park, conceived me, and 9 months almost to the day after World War II ended, I was born. So if I am not the first baby boomer that was actually conceived by a GI returning home, I am close. You know, can't be too far. I grew up in the Cascade Heights section of Atlanta, which is in southwest Atlanta, and there were a whole lot of people from that part of town that went to West Georgia, because it's really just down the street. One of the main roads through Cascade Heights was Carrollton Road. That's 166. Bankhead Highway goes right by the college. So all I had to do to go to college was go down the street, 50 miles, you know. But it was just down the street. My grandparents lived in West End, and that is like further in from Cascade Heights to town. You can actually see the tall buildings from there. And their house was built in 1914, so that gives you an idea how old the neighborhood was. But in West End was the Wren's Nest, which is the home of Joel Chandler Harris. My grandmother was active in the Wren's Nest Preservation Society, or whatever the name of the group is that keeps that house up. And I was all over that place growing up. I grew up with burr rabbit, burr bear, burr fox, and all that stuff. And I really think that's where I learned to tell stories. My little brother, I have a brother that's 16 years younger than I am, and he works for Disney, and he lives in Hollywood. And there's a picture. My grandmother was president of the Wren's Nest Society when they made Song of the South. And there's a picture of my grandmother shaking Walt Disney's hands. And somebody's got the picture, one of my other brothers or something. Everybody says they can't find it, but I don't believe it's gone. It's somewhere. And my little brother, that would love to have it since he works for Disney, he is the assistant director of the TV show Kessel. So we're real proud of him. He was smarter than the rest of us. He went to Duke, you know. I've written 3 books not so long ago: Bad Roads for Good Men and Sleeping Dogs Bark at Night. The first book I wrote, I worked in Iraq for 4.5 years, driving a truck. And I worked with the young soldiers to the point that I thought I looked like them. I didn't realize I was old until I came back to America. And I was amazed at how little about history they knew. And I can remember talking to a couple of guys, and they were going, "You mean they made you go in the Army?" They didn't even know about the draft. And I'm like, I just couldn't believe that. And I said, I started feeling like our story was getting lost. And I said, I'm going to write what I was calling at the time a historical novel. I figured, well, I'll write a historical novel, and since I'm not a historian and I lived it, I don't have to do any research, so take a shortcut. But I guess really it's realistic fiction. It would be a closer description, especially of that book. And it starts out here at West Georgia. When we come to school in 1965, really went behind the ears, and it goes. I was in Dr. Kennedy's class, my very first quarter, as a matter of fact, and goes through college. We lived in Foster Store, which was an old grocery store that down by the CVS pharmacy is still there. It's about to fall down, but it's still there. And if you look, it says Rosemont Towing or Rosewood
Jennings.
Towing. And
Jennings
Jennings Towing, yeah, on it, and it's still there, and that's where we live. And a good portion of the book takes place there. Let's see. I wanted to write this from just a regular guy point of view. It seems like everything gets written about, like the major war protesters or the war heroes. I just wanted to write about a guy who's trying to live his life, mind his own business, and has to deal with all this. And that part of the 60s, there were so many changes while I was in college. Looking back on it, it's really scary. When I started to West Georgia, we had to wear a coat and tie on Sunday to the mess hall. When I left, it was wide open, you know. It was such a total change in such a quick time that it was really a little frightening. My second book, I wrote that book in Iraq. We worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week over there. And we would have to do missions, and when we weren't doing missions, we had to get the trucks loaded and whatnot, but still, we couldn't fill up 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, so we had a lot of downtime. We had a break tent. We weren't allowed to just go home. And we had a break tent. We would spend hours in there, and I just brought my laptop, which even that was against the rules, and started writing not so long ago. And of course, the guys saw me writing, and then of course, the next thing is going to be write a book about us. So I did, and it was really there was a world of material. I just simply made a list of all the things that happened, and then I took 3 characters. One of them was kind of me. It's kind of me in every book. And I assigned all these things that happened to the various characters and arranged it into a story. Because life is full of stuff, it just doesn't come in the right order, you know. So I made a story out of it. And that book actually sold a few copies, not by Random House standards, but because so many guys, Vietnam, Iraq veterans were interested, especially the truck drivers, and we were all hooked up on Facebook, so it sold. And the third book, which is what we're here to talk about tonight, I lived in Fayetteville for 15 years, and at that point in my life, I was a contractor. I've done a lot of things. I probably should have majored in something else, that's for sure. Because I didn't, it took me a long time to find myself. I was nearly 70 before I did. Anyway, I lived in Fayetteville, and I ran across a young man named Ricky Minner. We met in a real estate school, and he owned a house. He was younger. He was like just graduated from the University of Georgia. And he owned a house in Inman, Georgia, which is south of Fayetteville, and a little community. And it was built in 1840. It was originally one of those dog trot houses. And it had been the overseer's house on a plantation. And the plantation house was burned down by Sherman. But he wanted to remodel it. So, you know, I was a contractor, but we did it on a cost-plus basis. There was no way I could give him a price on that. And we were working on it. And he came in and he started laughing and just kind of giggling to himself. And I said, well, what's so funny? And he said, Dr. Sams, who is Farrell Sams, who was the doctor in town, he was everybody's doctor, has written a book about Fayetteville back in the 1930s. And some of you probably most of you are familiar with Run with a Wild Horseman, right? Well, when I met Ricky, I did not realize who he was. He was Jim Minner's son that was the editor of the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, and Jim was editing the book for Farrell Sams. So that kind of inspired me a little bit, you know, to want to write. So it just inspired me. And Dr. Sams called the town of Fayetteville Bruton in his book. And I stole it from him, and I also stole some of the characters. There were young boys in his book, and I've got them in old men. But one of the reasons I did that is Ricky pointed them out to me, because they were real people. And we were riding by the barber shop one day, and he said, "See that old man going in the barber shop?" And I said, "Yeah, I won't tell you what he did in the book, but I said, he's the one that did that." And you know, he was like 80 then. So, and I heard a lot of those stories anyway before I ever read his book. They were kind of around town. But in Fayetteville at that time, there was a huge church, and it was controversial. Fayetteville was on the edge of a sprawling Atlanta, and you had the conflict between the old timers and the new people moving in, mostly airport people, and little tension there. And the big church, whose name I will not say, but probably some of you know what it is, was very controversial, and especially among the people that had lived there all along. It was, and the preacher was even more. He was kind of a lightning rod type. Either you liked him or you didn't, you know. And maybe a couple of years later, his wife died in childbirth, which is very tragic. But there were rumors all around town that something had gone on, that this was no accident. And nobody was ever charged or anything like that. But when I heard the rumors, I told the person that told it to me, I said, "That'd make a hell of a book." You know, I don't know if it's true, but I'd make a hell of a book. So I wrote it, and that's how that got started. And that's what I'll read from tonight. I hope I haven't picked a section that's too long. And currently, I wrote the book about West Georgia in Iraq. And I am a member of the Carrollton Creative Writers Club, and it's very kind of important to me. But we were getting ready for MegaFest, and I was reading something from it, and I just closed it up. I went, I'm a better writer than that now. I made up my mind right then to abandon what I was doing and rewrite that book for two reasons. One is, the main reason is I'm a better writer now. Two is, I live here now. I had no idea I'd ever be back in this area. I came here, I met Brenda, and she lived in Bowden, and the opening came up in the retirement community over here, last one, and I just jumped on it and moved into it. And I turned 66. All this happened within a month, you know, boom, and I was here. And so that's how I got here, but I'm rewriting that book, and it's virtually done. It's being proofread. Faye had already done her proofread of it, and my sister-in-law has it now and doing one. And I don't anticipate she's going to find very much after Faye does it, but she's got it. I got a local interest thing here. That first of all, when I was thinking about this, I got to thinking, you know, civil manufacturers in Bremen and Bowden and I think Tallapoosa. But to my knowledge, there's no plant here in Carrollton. Is there a reason for that? Does anybody know? I don't know either. I just kind of wonder. But here's my Warren Sewell story. My grandfather, he was from Grantville, Georgia originally. He moved to Atlanta and went to work for the Pullman Company at the Atlanta terminal on the corner of Spring and Mitchell. And he worked there. He was there the day the plant opened. The train station opened in 1903, and he stayed there till 1918, when he opened a men's shop on Mitchell Street. And in 1924, I know this because I Googled it. Warren Sewell opened his first production plant above my grandfather's store. You know how the old stores were. You had the two, maybe three stories of. I don't seem like there was an awful lot of people making false teeth back in those days. Up in those places. Anyway, Warren Sewell opened his first factory above my father's store. And in 1928, he came to my grandfather and said, I think I'm going to move to Bremen. I think he's originally from Bremen. I'm not sure about that. I want to move to Bremen. I'm thinking about it. He said, what do you think? And my grandfather listened to his plan. He said, I think it's a good idea. Warren Sewell said, would you like to invest in it with me? My grandfather said no. And he said yes. Those saw all these signs basically Sewell and Old Kelly, which would have been great. During the war, though, he was pretty good friends with him. I kind of figured I'd end up going to work for him from West Georgia, even though I never met Warren Sewell, or Warren Sewell Jr. for that matter. But during the war, everything switched to military uniforms, and my grandfather's store was full of military uniforms. So, you know, he was doing dress uniforms and that type thing. And then the war ended, and so he's got all these uniforms, and you can't buy cloth and clothes and all that stuff yet because production has to switch. And in the meantime, you could easily go out of business. But when Warren Sewell came to his rescue, and he was so big by then, selling my grandfather a bolt of cloth really didn't matter. But my grandfather employed tailors, and he had cloth, and he could get you a suit made right after the war. And that's what kept him in business. So, you know, he had a great debt of gratitude to Warren Sewell. And I'm going to read, if this just gets too long, it is a little longer than I think it ought to be. I'm not going to read all of the chapter, but I'm going to read about, out of the book, which was Sleeping Dogs Bark at Night. Most of the book, as I mentioned, takes place in the 80s. But there is flashbacks to the 60s, and this is the story of the other woman who is really, I think, my favorite character in the book. I like her because she kind of takes the bull by the horns, and she just doesn't let life dictate to her. She does all right, except she does get kind of, well, she just sort of falls in love with the wrong guy, let's say. Okay.